Hi, welcome to the Personal History Hub. This video is our first video on the Vietnam War, first content video, and it's going to be on the origins of the conflict in Vietnam. So what was it like pre-World War II? So before the Second World War, Vietnam was actually a French colony, so it's owned by the French. In the years following the Second World War, the people of Vietnam managed to overthrow the rule of France, but they divided the country into north under communist control and then south supported by the west. That's where American involvement comes in. Vietnam became another testing ground for the idea of communism versus capitalism in the Cold War, and the US became increasingly involved in the 50s and early 60s. So that picture is a map of what it was like under the French, so it was known as French Indochina. So what happened during World War II then? So the conflict in Vietnam mainly has its origins in developments during and after the Second World War. In 1939, Vietnam was part of an area known as French Indochina, as you saw in the map before. So this included modern-day Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia. French rule was very harsh and very unpopular with the people there, and it led to a lot of uprisings, such as that of 1930, led by the Nationalist Party of Vietnam. Such attempts were obviously brutally crushed by the French. Japan then invaded and occupied Indochina in 1940, so during World War II. Some in Vietnam saw this as an ideal opportunity to then overthrow French rule and achieve its independence. In 1941, two leading Vietnamese communists, Ho Chi Minh and General Giap, a history teacher, set up the League for the Independence of Vietnam, or the Vietminh as it became known, in southern China. Their aim was to establish an independent Vietnam, so completely free from French or Japanese rule. The US intelligence service helped by training and equipping the Vietminh. So originally the US was helping and on the side of the Vietminh. And by 1944, it was ready to begin guerrilla operations against the Japanese in North Vietnam. These were essentially small-scale attacks that were very successful and increased support for the Vietminh, which by 1945 had 5,000 guerrilla fighters. In August 1945, the Japanese were defeated in the Second World War and forced to evacuate all their conquests, including Vietnam. So who is Ho Chi Minh? So he was born in central Vietnam. He was very well travelled and lived in London and Paris in his younger years, where he helped set up the French Communist Party. He returned to China in 1924 and established the Indo-Chinese Communist Party and worked to bring about an independent communist Vietnam. In 1941, he was the joint founder of the Vietminh movement, fighting for independence. He continued to fight against the French and defeated the French at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. I'm going to do a more detailed video in the next video all about Dien Bien Phu if you want to find out more about that. He then became the president of North Vietnam. Until his death in 1969, he led the North Vietnamese in a battle to reunite North and South Vietnam. In 1975, Saigon was then renamed Ho Chi Minh City in his honour. So, post-war settlements. In September 1945, Ho Chi Minh quickly occupied the two leading cities of Hanoi and Saigon and announced that Vietnam was an independent and democratic republic. At first, the USA, who did not want to see the restoration of the old colonial empires, sympathised with Ho Chi Minh and the idea of an independent Vietnam. However, the new independent republic was short-lived, as within weeks the French had moved 50,000 troops into Indochina. The French quickly restored control over South Vietnam, where the Vietminh were weak, and drove Ho Chi Minh and his followers into the jungles of North Vietnam. In the next 5 years, Ho Chi Minh conducted another guerrilla campaign, this time against the French. The developments in China. In 1949, the Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, successfully won their civil war and established a communist government. Mao then supported the Vietminh with essential military supplies. The USA now feared that communism would sweep across Asia and switch support to the French. In 1950, President Truman agreed to send the French $15 million worth of supplies. Over the next 3 years, the USA spent nearly $3 billion helping the French. Okay, don't forget to subscribe to the Personal History Hub. The next video is going to be all about Dien Bien Phu.